Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath. When the fire's voice is heard, 'tis the ancestors' breath and the voice of the waters. Those who have died never, never left. Those who are died are not under the earth. They're in the rustling trees. They're in the groaning woods. They're in the crying grass. They're in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. This is from a poem that Sweet Honey and the Rock did as a song called Breaths. It goes on to say, those who have died never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in a crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath and the voice of the waters. Again, this is from a poem by Sweet Honey and the Rock. This poem is very important to me because it puts into words how I feel about ancestors, how they're always with us. So I welcome you to Culture and Dining with Ade. Welcome to my world. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to honor your ancestors in some very simple steps. Yeah, it makes me cry because ancestors are my connection to who I am. It's my connection to my past. It's who my people were, what they did, how they lived, how they sustained themselves. I'm gonna hope I don't cry through this whole thing because tomorrow's my grandfather's birthday. And I endeavor to celebrate him one way or another, just like I celebrate my grandmother and my 5 uncles and an aunt. Knowing who your ancestors are empowers you. It helps you to know the strength that you come from. It's your story. It's your family history. So that's the first way I'm going to talk about in celebrating your ancestors and honoring them is knowing your genealogy, knowing your family story, knowing your history. I know that I am the granddaughter of the grandson of an enslaved man. His name was James Harrison. What I know of James Harrison is that he was born in Virginia and he got here to Texas. Not sure how or when. I know that as a young boy he was taught to read, as it was his responsibility to walk the young mister to school every day. And this little boy, halfway to school and on the way home, taught my grandfather James how to read. Grandfather James was a plantation minister, so he spread the word of God on the plantation. He was married to a woman named Eliza, and he is the father of my great-grandfather David, Wilburn, Ola, Alice, and Andrew. So one of the very first things, again, you can do to honor your ancestors is to know their names. Don't be afraid of the history. Know it. Own it. No matter what it looks like, good, bad, or indifferent. It's your story. You need to know it. Because when you are armed with your story, no one can use it against you, and no one can tell you that what your worth is. They can't give you your worth because you know your worth, because you know your people, you know your ancestors. In respect to honoring my ancestors, one of the things that I do is I cook what they like to eat. I prepare dinner for them, and I sit down and eat dinner with them. That's the second way you can honor your ancestors. If you know, like my grandfather liked chicken and dumplings, I didn't eat that with him. I took it to him. I walked from my house to his house and took him his pot of chicken and dumplings, or his pocket of chitterlings. But he loved German chocolate cake. So I'm going to bake a German chocolate cake for my grandfather. And that's something we share together. And the other thing that I do that always reminds me of my grandfather is drink coffee. Maybe it was more milk coffee. But then my mother told me his coffee was very strong, so that's probably why he had all that milk and sugar in it. And gardening is the other thing that I do to honor my grandfather. My sister and my grandfather's thing were pinwheel cookies. That's her way of remembering and honoring our grandfather. I tell the stories to my younger brothers because they weren't old enough to have large memories of spending time with him because they were very little when my grandfather transitioned. For my Aunt Loretta, I make greens and cornbread. That was her thing. So it's very easy to do. Know your genealogy. Prepare foods that they loved and eat with them. This Thanksgiving, when you have your dinner, whether it's virtual or in person, start to tell the stories of who they are. Share their stories. That's another way. With the generations who were not born or those who are too young to remember, share those stories with them. Another way you can honor your ancestors is to create sacred space for them. Whether you have a table where you have their pictures and that's all that's on the table is pictures of them, and as a side, no living people in the pictures with the ancestors when you create this altar or create a shrine. Or it can be on a table, it could be on a wall. I'm beginning a wall for both my ancestors and my in-laws to tell their stories on the wall so that my children will know their ancestors on their father's side, so that my granddaughters will know my husband's side of the family and know who they are, because it is a rich history, an awesome story. I'll share their story with you another day. But my in-laws have a tremendous story of courage, of love, persistence, tenacity, and family. So again, create a table. I will do a different video and show you how to create, one, the altar or the sacred space, and then two, how to pour a libation. But briefly, pouring a libation is simply a prayer. We have all seen someone pour a libation. If you are old enough, in your 50s, 60s, and up, we have all seen the movie Coolie High. And at the end of the movie, there is the funeral scene, and they're at the graveyard. And Glenn Turman's character does not go to the funeral, right? He waits till everybody leaves, and he goes to his friend's gravesite. And he stands there with their favorite drink that they always shared together. And he poured some on the ground and he said some words. That is the simplest of libations that one can do. We do it all the time. We just didn't know what it is. Who you don't know is pouring something on the ground for the homies who ain't there. You probably done it yourself, right? I know you probably have. And if you haven't, you've seen it. Haven't you? Okay. So, a traditional libation begins with paying homage to God, paying homage to your inner guide, to the prophets, the warners, the messengers of God, the Mother Earth, and your ancestors. It's as simple as this. I will do it in English. Okay? So you would say, I pay homage to God, I pay homage to God, I pay homage to God. I pay homage to my inner guide. I pay homage to the messengers, the prophets, the warners, and the saints. I pay homage to the Mother Earth, which supports us. I pay homage to my ancestors of good character. Come and be with me, come and guide me, come and protect me. Ashe, which means may it be so, but it is also a word of power. If I said it traditionally, the way that I would do it, it would sound like this. Iba Oldumari, Iba Oldumari, Iba Oldumari. Iba Awo Akoda, Iba Asheda, Iba Leo Getting a Foko, Iba Jigini, Iba Gini, Iba Jigini Gini, Iba Olosai, Iba Oloku, Osa Kimbe, Okun Kimbe. Iba Oti Ojo, Iba Oti Wo, Hun, Iba Osong Gong Gong, Makin Oba. I would pay homage to my godfather then, Baba Ogunde. Iba Egun, priest of good character. Iba Eshu, Iba Ogun, Iba Obatala, Iba Orunle, Iba Shango, Iba Oshun, Iba Yemoja Olukun. Iba Oya, Iba Obaluaye, Iba Ochosi. I pay homage to James Harrison. I pay homage to David Harrison. I pay homage to Joe Harrison. I would then call out all of the names of my ancestors. A libation is poured with either water, because that's our first libation, water and blood. When we come into the physical from the spiritual, our mother, water must break. Either it breaks on its own, or when she gets to the hospital, they're going to break her water for her. And then the blood and the baby. In the Yoruba tradition, they say the good comes with the bad. That's how we will have life. So they take the bad, which they call the placenta, and use it to make medicine for the baby. We already know how important placenta is because it's used in all kind of cosmetics, right? Right. So again, know your genealogy. Call their names. Prepare a dinner for them. Create a sacred space or a wall for them. And short of that, you could always have what we call a family photo album and put their pictures in that and put a story in there with them. These are the simple ways in which you can honor your ancestors every day and lift them up. I know that a lot of us don't want to acknowledge the part of the country's history in regard to enslavement, let alone our personal family histories in regard to enslavement. What I want you to know, beloved, is that those Africans who were captured and or sold were not just anybody. These people had skills, they had talents that were needed for the new world. So, if nothing else, we must celebrate these ancestors because had they not survived the Ma'afa, that journey from the west coast of Africa and some the east coast to this new world, you wouldn't be born, you beloved. You wouldn't be you. So if nothing else, that's the reason to celebrate them, to lift them up, to call their names. They went through a whole lot. We must acknowledge them and the pain that they went through and thank them for surviving. Thank them for surviving. Again, listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the water. They're not dead. They are with us. They're with us in the woman's milk. They are with us in the wailing child. Listen more often to things than to beings. That is a song based on a poem by Sweet Honey and the Rock. I encourage you to go listen to that song as you think about your ancestors, because Halloween is coming up, right? And I don't know how to say, so I'm not going to butcher the word for when the Mexican culture celebrates their dead. When they go to the cemetery, they clean the cemetery. They take food with them and sit out at their ancestors' gravesite and have dinner or lunch or whatever they eat with them is the bottom line. I encourage you to watch the movie Coco because it is a beautifully told story. I said that all wrong. It is a beautifully told story about connecting to one's ancestors. And not to give you any spoilers, but this piece right here solidified for me the notion when in African culture they say as long as there's one person alive who still calls that ancestor's name, that ancestor is not dead. In the movie Coco, there is a scene where the young boy is taken to talk to an ancestor, and this particular ancestor begins to evaporate because on this day, that veil between the two, the living, the physical and the spiritual, has thinned, and the ancestors are coming to talk to their descendants, and descendants are coming to talk to ancestors because there's no one to clean his grave. There's no one to talk to him or call his name. He begins to evaporate into time. So again, this is Adepeju. Welcome. And thank you for watching Culture and Dining with Ade. Welcome to my world. Don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. Okay? Now y'all go out and be